ask, public school education in this state traditionally has been at the bottom. We're down there with Mississippi year in and year out. Lowest paid public school teachers, lowest high school graduation, and both Mississippi and the great state of New Mexico are viewed as basically having the dumbest locals that you can possibly have. And do you have a plan that is somehow going to separate us from the great state of Mississippi? That's my question.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. I just came from the National Education Association. Had a great guy who was talking about, economic development. What is economic development? We subsidize all these companies. Here, come to New Mexico, we'll give you a big check, and please come to New Mexico. And they've had economists actually study this, and the states that put more money into education have a return. And this is not just the United States. This is all developed countries, right? The return on investment, and just invest for every dollar you invest in K through 12, is about 12.5%. So if anybody of us got that on our 401k, I think we would probably invest in that. Instead, we're saying, oh, HP, will you come here? Here's a subsidy. Intel, will you stay here? Here's $2 billion in IRBs. So we got to invest in it, first of all. It's not just about money, but right now, they also showed a graph of where spending on education was in the 80s and where it is now, and there's a huge gap. We're not even keeping pace with where we were. So this myth that we've thrown money at education, that's not the problem. We need to put more money. Secondly, my wife's a teacher. She's not in the classroom, but she was in the classroom, and there's other educators here. And what they all say is, testing doesn't make us better teachers. Testing doesn't make these kids better. Let teachers teach, support them, train them. Teacher pay lags every other profession in terms of real growth. So we've continued, every other field has continued to have growth in their pay. Teachers, flat. So we want them to do more. We want them to test more. We're paying them the same amount, and then we blame them when kids don't succeed. Yet we're cutting back on social programs. We're cutting back on healthcare programs. We're cutting back on early Head Start programs. We're cutting back on after-school programs. So you have these kids show up at school, and a teacher who's been paid the same thing she's been paid since the 1970s in real terms, adjusted for inflation. And why isn't she fixing it? Oh, and by the way, she's got to spend weeks out of every semester testing those kids to death with measures that do not work. So you want more accountability? We're all for accountability. Better graduation rates, lower teenage pregnancy rates, invest in kids more, let teachers do what they do, respect them for the people that they are. Most teachers aren't like, hey, I'm going to go into teaching, I'm going to get rich. They do it because they love kids. And most of them are pretty good at it. And the ones that aren't good, let's help them find another job. So I think we can do it. But we've got to be willing to put our money where our mouth was. Everybody's pro-education at election time, but are we willing to put the dollars into it?
Where's the money going to come from?
Great idea. So Mark has offered to fund through the Rudd Foundation, which is not unlike the Gates Foundation, it's a little smaller. No, the funding, let me tell you where the funding could come from. If we just asked everybody who makes $250,000 a year or more, and I apologize to those of you who are in that tax bracket here, but $250,000 or more to just say, we don't want the Bush tax cut, we're going to pay back into it. We asked them to do that. We asked Wall Street speculators to pay what other countries in Europe asked them to pay, 0.25% on those speculative trades. We did those two things, we could double the education budget. We could double the education budget. That's not even talking about eliminating the loopholes for big oil. That's not even talking about eliminating the loopholes for big pharma and all the other industries who get corporate loopholes. So, and the other thing we could do to get the money is, and I didn't say this, is we got to, I'm really happy that the president says we're bringing those troops home from Iraq, period. We're bringing them home. Because their families deserve it, the troops deserve it, and we cannot afford to keep them there. We need to bring the troops back from Afghanistan. We do both of those things, that's more money we could put into education. So, the money's there. It's a question of priorities. Yeah. All right. One last question. So,
banking industry. How are you going to vote when it comes down to putting stricter or more regulation on financial institutions and kind of separating the investment banks from the commercial banks?
We learned this the hard way. We learned way back again during the Great Depression. If you let banks do everything, then they're going to get into some pretty speculative endeavors, and you let the same people who are making the loans make the investments or bundle mortgages and then sell those mortgages. So we need somebody who's willing to just say, look, I don't care if the financial services industry bankrolls my opponent, you got to take them on. And there are people like that. Raul Grijalva's one of them. Bernie Sanders is another one. Paul Wellstone was talking about it 20 years ago. There are a few people talking about it. So no, they absolutely have to. We have, you know, the people who say that deregulation is the way to grow the economy, all you have to say is Wall Street. That's what happens when you deregulate.
That's right.
When you let
Out of
big,
control.
powerful corporations and banks do whatever they want and get into multiple lines of business that really are a huge conflict, then we have Wall Street, we have the mortgage crisis. When you deregulate the mining industry, you have deaths in West Virginia, like those families who lost their loved ones in mining, in 2 mining accidents over the last 2 years. You have what happened with BP, right? People pushed for years that we ought to be regulating them. Well, what happens when we don't regulate? So the guys who are saying deregulate, 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 just say, well, Wall Street. The quintessential example, the Democrats and the Republicans voted together to deregulate Wall Street. So it's not a partisan issue. We need to stand up to Wall Street, even though they give billions to campaigns. It's sick how much money they give, like Big Pharma. You know, and guess what? And I just want to warn you all now, if I'm the nominee, we expect to be, those same guys are going to be spending millions in this race to make me out to be an axe murderer. So, because they have a lot to lose. They have a lot to lose because they know that guys like me and Grijalva and Bernie Sanders and some other really good folks up there who are going to fight for this, Keith Ellison, are going to say, you know what? Enough is enough. Separate those lines of business. You shouldn't be making money off the people who you're lending to, and then, you know, selling them the bogus investments or bundling these really bad mortgages and saying they're AAA rated and selling them to municipalities. And it's just it needs to be. We need whole other levels of regulation on Wall Street and the banking industry. So anyway, I know everybody's tired and hot, so have some food. I want you to keep one request. Keep Ron's dad, who's been very, very ill. Ron's been a caretaker on top of everything he does for this community and for his house and for his family and his own. He's a small business owner. I'm very proud that he's one of the people who creates jobs in this community. He's been really taking care of his dad, and please keep him in your prayers. He's not doing too well, and I really appreciate him doing this, especially with his dad not doing so well. So Ron, please say a prayer for Ron's dad and keep him in your thoughts and prayers. And thank you all very much for being here.
A couple of people
Oh, yeah.
wanted to speak a little bit.
Sure.